Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
In some previous years, we have had as among our topics photography, and every time we do a program on that, which has been some time ago, we get such wonderful reactions from you, the viewers. And we're so pleased to bring that topic again to you, titled Techniques for Effective Photography. And we're so pleased to have a colleague here today who's most professional and qualified to discuss this issue. Welcome to the program, Phil Corliss. Our guest is a faculty member at North Idaho College teaching in the field of photography, and he holds a baccalaureate degree from Lewis-Clark State College and his master's from the University of Idaho, and has been very distinguished on our faculty for a number of years. And Phil, thank you for taking time to do this. It's a very, very popular subject, particularly here in the Northwest where the outdoors is so special.
My pleasure, Tony. I'm glad to be here.
And as always, I'm pleased to have our panelist, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho. And next to her is our Director of Public Relations, Erna Reinhardt. And we'll ask Janelle to commence today's questioning.
Phil, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we're going to talk about something that's very enjoyable, photography. How did you become interested in photography, and what is your background?
I think I first got fascinated by photography when I was about 12 years old. I think that was about the time I got my very first camera, and it seemed to open up whole worlds to me. And so I started taking pictures, and of course would hand the film off to Dad, and he'd take it to the store and get it processed. And something about seeing those images come back was just magical to me. It was about a year later that we had a neighbor that had a darkroom in his basement, and my dad got in touch with that neighbor, and I can remember going down and watching him make a print and exposing the paper to light and then sticking it in the first tray of chemicals and watching that image come up on that blank piece of paper, and I was just hooked for life. It was something that I had to just kind of continue doing.
Of course, things have changed a lot since then, and so what kind of equipment do you use now?
Oddly enough, I kind of work in a couple of different areas. One style of photography that I work at passionately is called large format photography. Very big old-fashioned cameras making large-size negatives. The negatives are 4 by 5 inches, and still working in a very traditional way with a wet chemical lab and an enlarger and printing black and white prints onto paper and kind of doing exactly what I saw way back when. My other fascination is with the whole new world of digital photography, and of course that's a hot topic right now, and there's a lot of exciting things happening in the world of digital photography for professionals and for amateurs as well.
Erna Reinhardt.
Let's talk, Phil, a little bit about the home hobbyist, or the people, the viewers that we're talking to today, and talk about maybe the types of equipment that they would be more apt to use. And I think that ranges from both a 35 millimeter to the common digital camera that a family might have. Can you tell us about those?
You bet. Today we're really blessed with having a wide variety of cameras available for folks to use. We've got, of course, the point and shoot category of cameras, all the way up to much more sophisticated 35 millimeter cameras. And lots of home enthusiasts simply want to take pictures of family get-togethers and the important moments in their lives, and so a more point and shoot type camera might really suit them best. Some folks want to continue that passion along and explore other things with their cameras, and so they may get to the more sophisticated types of cameras that have control. Of course, digital is becoming a big deal. I think last year the statistics are that around the globe 50 million digital cameras were sold last year, so it's here to stay. And I think the immediacy of seeing those images, the instant after you snap the shutter on the camera, is not only exciting, but it can be good for somebody that wants to learn about photography as well, because you can get instant feedback on how you're doing framing up the image and composing the photograph and making the exposure. So it's not only a lot of fun, but it can be a great tool to kind of explore the world of photography.
Can you tell us a little bit about, our family, my husband and I just bought a digital camera this Christmas. Tell us a little bit about what people should look for when they're going to make that purchase.
Digital cameras are kind of an extension of traditional photography. I think first of all you need to think about purchasing a camera that's going to fit your needs. In terms of, is it a pocketable camera? Is it something that I'm going to want to put some accessories with? Of course, the other issue has to do with just exactly how many, the magic word megapixels in digital photography, just how many megapixels does this camera need to have to record a sharp, clear image. That kind of depends on what you want to do with the pictures. If you want to just see them on a computer monitor, and I guess it might want to point that out as well, if you're going to have a digital camera, you've got to have a computer to deal with those electronic images. If you just want to see them on the computer monitor, a couple of megapixels is plenty big enough. If you want to have prints much larger than about 4 by 6 inch size prints, well, you really need to have something like 4 or 5 megapixels to be able to blow that image up. You're literally talking about how many millions of little square pegs make up that image, and so that's where the megapixel comes in. So I think it's going to be a different answer for everyone. Digital cameras are more expensive than film cameras, and so to get some of the same sort of capabilities that a film camera would offer you, you've got to expect to spend more money. And I wouldn't want anyone watching the program today that think that film is dead, because that's sure not the case, and I don't think it ever will be. I think these two formats are going to live side by side.
Awesome.
We certainly want to show some of your work, and that will excite our viewers to know that you have such expertise. And then on the program before it ends, we'll talk some about technique of different kinds of photographs or filming. I want to ask our staff at this point to put up the first image, and then here it is. And you take us through these, please.
You bet. I've brought along some images today so that we can just think about how to be better photographers. Certainly part of photography is dealing with the technical issues of exposure, but I think a lot of folks can make better pictures simply by thinking about what's inside the frame of the photograph. This first image of the kid sitting on the tractor seat was taken at Green Bluff in the fall. And I guess the point here is you got to be prepared for those magical moments in life. When a magical moment occurs, you've got to be ready to really capture it the best way you possibly can. We can sure see that in the great look in these kids' face and the nice light. And the next image as well, I think, is an example of that. Sitting down on the curb at the 4th of July parade, one of my favorite events here in Coeur d'Alene. It's a wonderful parade. Having the camera at the ready allows you to capture kind of spontaneous, magical moments like this and put them in your family album or email them to your friends. So I think that's a pretty fun picture, if nothing else. Not only being prepared, though, I think we also, as photographers, need to look for fresh perspectives of the world. A lot of folks like to take pictures standing straight up with the camera about 5 feet off the ground, looking straight ahead. Sometimes if you get down at a very low angle or move in, you can take a much more dramatic kind of photograph. This was taken out, whoops, looks like we went ahead, so we'll go on to the next one. That last picture was taken out at Cataldo and is simply trying to isolate the teepee against or the lodge against the pretty clouds. Here again, just kind of a nice close-up, fresh perspective. This is actually the old red fire truck that they use in the parades. You can usually find this parked at the Harris Dean Insurance Agency or about that neck of town. And I just decided rather than shoot the whole gosh darn fire engine, it might be fun to come in and do something a little bit different. So I think in the photographs as we create them, we really want to try and look for a fresh perspective for our pictures. Don't just accept the ordinary point of view. Another thing that can help with our photographs, I think, is to get a lot closer to the subjects as we photograph them. We are all timid souls, and I know that I beg and plead with my Intro to Photo students to think about getting much closer to the things that they want to capture on film. In this particular picture, I think it's difficult to figure out just exactly what the photographer found to be so gosh darn interesting in the first place. But there is a possibility for a subject here, and if we just take a few steps in closer, we might capture a picture that looks a little more like this. So getting close is always a good idea. We always seem to capture way too much real estate in our photographs. Here the intent of this picture is pretty straightforward and pretty clear, and I think that this picture of these dogwood blossoms really works pretty well. So getting closer is a big plus. Another thing that we might think about doing is trying to position our subjects off-center. So much of the time we think about trying to make sure that that subject doesn't get away from us, and so we want to pretty much put it smack dab in the middle of the frame so we've got room in case it decides to dart away from us, and I don't think this is going anywhere. So rather than just sticking the subject in the middle of the picture space, I think it's fun to think about positioning it someplace else. This kind of odd view of what's left of the tent from Expo that we had over here in Spokane. I think it makes kind of a pretty photograph, and just the fact that the lines in the picture radiate all over the place, I think gives it some kind of viewer interest. Another example from Spokane is this nice off-center subject placement as well. We got the pretty flowers leading up to the clock tower and a little bit of that same tent kind of poking in from the background of the picture. And if you look at this photograph, there's really not much happening dead center in the picture. I've tried to counterbalance the elements in this case so that they sort of offset that dead center, and I think it can add a little more energy and a little more pizzazz to the picture. So I think this is a good example of maybe trying to keep things just a bit off center. Another thought to keep in mind is to watch the background in our photographs. If we're not careful, we'll have all sorts of odd things start to leak into our picture. Here it's a beautiful young lady, great sunshine, a terrific smile. Unfortunately, she looks like she has a tree growing right out of the top of her head. I talk to my students all the time to ask themselves one simple question before they snap the shutter on the camera. Ask yourself, what's in the background? We tend to get so much concerned with making sure the subject is doing something just right. Sometimes we forget we're also taking pictures of other things. In the case of this photograph, a better solution might be a picture like this. Here we've just got the same great looking girl, same gorgeous smile, great blue eyes. We've just positioned her against a much simpler, darker background. So now we don't seem to have trees growing out of the top of her head. I think most people would say that's a better picture than that. Okay, so we've got to watch the background in our pictures. So if we go in and we try to be prepared, we look for fresh perspectives, we get close, and we try a little off-center subject placement, we can improve our photographs. This is one of my black and white pieces. This is, I guess, what I do with my big camera, my large format camera. This was actually taken outside of Davenport in Washington. It's some old grain elevators, and there's a lot of thought and care and planning into the construction of this photograph, and a lot of work done in the darkroom to make it look the way it looks. This is, I was very fortunate. This is a photograph of a portion of the inside of the Star Phoenix mine up in Burke, Idaho. I was very fortunate to have the cooperation of the Hecla Corporation to be able to spend a summer up there photographing what's left of the Star Phoenix mine. And it was a fascinating experience. In many instances, the interior of the buildings looks like the men just put their tools down and walked away. And so it's a fascinating bit of American history. It's a fascinating bit of Idaho history. I not only participated in that as a photographer, but I learned a lot about the history of our region, the history of mining in North Idaho. It is a rich heritage, and there's fascinating stories to be told. This is the inside of a space that actually held the motors that ran the men up and down in the mine shafts. And of course, pretty much everything's been taken away from the scene. The kind of odd-looking octagon-shaped metal structure that you see there used to be a large counterweight that hung and could drop through that hole. So in case the cars ever started freewheeling down the tunnels, they would drop that weight and it would essentially stop the cars so they wouldn't slide all the way to the bottom. Pretty happy with that picture, and once again it kind of still involves some of those simple rules we were talking about before. Last photographic print of mine, this is just some rock forms. I tend to work in a lot of different ways with my photographs. Sometimes I like to go photograph out in the wheat fields of Washington or up in the old mining district. This was actually taken on the Skykomish River in Washington, just kind of playing with the shapes and the forms of the rocks, the way they interplay, and the nice kind of contrast between the bleached out rocks and the much moodier water that you see kind of in the background and kind of filling in those holes. I was fascinated by the shapes that had been sort of sculpted out of the rocks by the action of water and time. So those 3 pictures are, I guess, what I'd call my more quote-unquote serious work. It's my large format camera. It's spending a great deal of time and care to craft the image. It probably takes me 20-30 minutes to get ready to make a photograph. And then, of course, once the image is made, then we're going to go ahead and process that film and then work on printing the prints. The prints are actually printed on fiber-based archival paper, and so the prints themselves, if I'm doing my job right, will last about 100 years. And so there's some sense of permanence to that work.
That is just amazing, and what you've been so helpful to our viewers because you've shown a variety of things in different places, different scenes, and different types of equipment. And we thank you, and if I have time on my next round, we'll talk some more about the techniques in relation to that. Janelle Burke.
Do you do moving pictures as well as still pictures? Everything we've seen has been still.
Yeah, I'm not a motion picture photographer. There's something about the still image that fascinates me. I find that the captured moment to me is more important than motion. I know other folks may love to make movies. I'm just a still photographic kind of guy. Thinking about that just real quickly, of course we all saw the photographs that came from Iraq, and we saw the live coverage that came from Iraq, and in my mind those still moments where they captured a particular moment in time in that conflict, to me anyway, were far more meaningful than watching 10 or 15 minutes or 30 minutes of moving footage. And so I think there's something magical about that still image where we freeze that moment in time and space.
Now my question also has to do with, if you are taking stills then, how many do you have to take in order to get one good one?
Well, that's a darn good question. If you're lucky, 1, but we're not often all that lucky.
Right.
To be honest with you, I think one of the things that professional photographers never really talk about is how many of their pictures you don't see. Where a home hobbyist may take 1 picture and call that good, a professional or serious amateur may take 20 or 30 pictures and they'll show you the one that really turned out. So capturing that moment can not only be a challenge, but it can be difficult to really find that moment that you think really actually captures the essence of what you were trying to say.
So the moral to this story is, take plenty of pictures. Don't be skimpy on the number that you're going to take.
Exactly. And of course, if you're working with digital equipment, you don't have to worry about the cost of film. So once again, the more pictures you take, the better you get at it. And you can always just not show folks the stuff that didn't turn out.
Thank you.
Erna Reinhardt.
Phil, many of us are camera shy, and I know in our office what we do take a lot of photos of people. And here's the $1 million question. Are there some tips on how you can make people feel more comfortable when they've got a camera in their face?
Especially Erna Reinhardt, because when we were doing some press conference the other day and some pinning on it, she refused to look. And so this might be great for Erna.
And some people, I mean,
Yes.
you know, you hear people say, oh, she's so photogenic, or he's so photogenic. But I think maybe there must be some ways that photographers can help make their subjects feel a little more relaxed.
I think so, and I don't know that I've got a top secret answer for you, but I can certainly give you something to think about. Of course, it's always fun to photograph professional models because they hit their marks and they know their jobs. Most of us don't live in that world. I think first and foremost, a person needs to understand that when you're photographing another person, it is primarily an interpersonal connection that needs to be made. And so when I'm working with someone that's a little camera shy, I'll try to spend some time allowing them to get to know me a little better, to get to know them a little better, so that they realize that we have some kind of connection there. There's nothing more difficult in the world than trying to walk up to somebody cold and asking if you can take their picture. I don't know anything harder in the whole wide world. And so I think what you really need to do is realize that this experience is much more about meeting that person and knowing that person than making their photograph. And quite frankly, until you get to know who they are, you really don't know how to photograph them. So friends and family are the easiest of all, but boy, like you say in your business, if I've got to go in and get a photograph of someone I don't know, it's worth spending the time sitting and talking with them first before you decide to pull the camera out of the bag.
Good advice.
That was a great question, because there are a lot of people that have to have photographs taken for different reasons that don't feel comfortable, and I would assume that you get a much better photograph when someone is more relaxed rather than, I know you might even capture their attention if you don't do that. You've shown us today some photographs from very different settings and different scenes. Would you share with our viewers some advice on why some particular localities or time that you have to put in is much more difficult than others? I'm thinking about, again with yours, and a lot of outdoor photography, or if the weather conditions or there's traffic or whatever there might be that might interfere with what your work is.
Yeah, there are some places that are pretty easy to photograph because you know that there's going to be some terrific subject matter when you get there. In my work, a lot of times I'll go to a location with a vague notion. Someone may have told me I should go see this thing or this place, and it can be very challenging to find the right thing in the environment to photograph, and then the right camera position to photograph it from. Some days I go put my big pack on my back and I go tromp around and I come home empty. It can be a real challenge. Sometimes you get to a location and there's wonderful things happening with the subject and maybe the lighting isn't right. And so it can be, for those of us that really work very seriously at photography, sometimes it's more of a quest, and sometimes you make the images and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you make great photographs of things you need to go back and shoot when things are better. So it can be a challenge. Sometimes we make photographs of extraordinary places, and sometimes we have to open our eyes and we have to think about making extraordinary photographs of ordinary things. And I find myself particularly frustrated out there in the world trying to make a photograph, it's usually because I have a certain thing in mind that I want to shoot and it's not there. And so I need to step back from that and to rethink the equation and open my eyes again and see what's really in front of me, because there's probably something there.
On this program, over the last 32 years, that's a long time to have a program, but we've interviewed a lot of authors of books and poets and people that do writing, and I've asked this question over and over. I'm so fascinated with their theme, their creative idea they came up with, and I always ask them, well, what happened? Were you dreaming about this, or were you sitting around thinking, how did you come up with such a great storyline? And in your photography, too, great moments and capture. I'm thinking of World War II and the great photograph of the raising of the flag. That's one of the most powerful ones ever taken, and of course that happened on a moment's notice. But in addition to that, capturing such a powerful thing, do you plan, you've indicated somewhat that, but do you set at times or think about what could I do that would be so powerful, and then you create that setting?
Oh gosh, I wish photography for me was that intellectual of a process.
Okay.
For me, photography, I guess, the only way I can put it is it's a much more spiritual process. Okay. I've had a number of people say, why is it you photograph the things you photograph? And to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I'm trying to celebrate the world. Certainly, I'm interested in finding the beauty in things, and so I can tell you that much. But to say what really strikes me about a place or a thing, it's difficult for me to say. There's just something that speaks to me, and I respond to it. I think in the case of photographers, many of us work from kind of an intuitive process, and it's maybe only in looking at the photographs later that we understand the stories that we're telling ourselves.
Thank you, Janelle Burke.
Light is very important to photography. Can you give our viewers some tips about how to look at the light? Because what happens to me is I get the pictures back, and then I recognize that I didn't have good light, or it was too much light, or whatever the case might be. Can you give us some tips, please?
Yeah, light is everything in photography. The name itself, photography, means light writing. Learning to see light is, as a matter of fact, what we're talking about in my classes right now. And I think that there are certain things that different qualities of light can give you. If you have a beautiful sunny day, Then you're going to have bright colors to play with. You've certainly got highlights and shadows, so the world is going to feel more three-dimensional. You can make images where texture is an important part of the story. So that bright, gorgeous sunlight is good for certain kinds of subjects and stories that we may want to tell. Hazy, cloudy, overcast days, frankly, are much better for taking flower pictures. Portraits of people are going to look much more pleasing if the light is softer. It's a more caressing, enveloping kind of light, and our portraits are going to turn out much better. On a sunny day, we can think about maybe finding a big patch of shade to stand in so that we can get that softer light bouncing off of the environment and filling that shadow area, getting under some really tall trees. And so the softer light tells a quieter, more intimate story. That beautiful, gorgeous sunshine is much better for playing with texture and dimension, and if we want really bright colors, we're going to see those on a sunny day. But for flower pictures and portraits, give me an overcast day every day of the week.
Okay, thank you.
I'm with you. Doesn't that sound weird? And I've heard that before. Photographers love overcast days, and it just seems backwards. But anyway, talk a little bit about career opportunities in photography. If there's somebody out there that might like to pursue maybe getting their photographs published, or what kind of opportunities are there to pursue a career in photography?
A lot of ways that folks can use photography as a career. I would say that the vast majority of people that are employed as photographers are either going to be working as photojournalists, or they're probably going to be working in a studio setting. And so they're going to be doing portrait photography or product photography or what we call industrial photography. That's where the vast majority of photographers are going to be employed. Getting your work published can be a difficult chore. There are a lot of folks out there that would love to have their work published. So number one, you have to actually get your work seen. And then number two, of course, you're in competition with all the other folks that want to pursue that avenue. Probably the loneliest photographers in the world are folks like myself that want to create fine art black and white photographs and exhibit them in a gallery, because now that you're talking about a very tiny clientele. Of course, there's lots of schools that one could attend to get a degree and to get the kind of craft and skill level necessary in order to work in any one of those arenas. But today, really, the publishing market is primarily dominated by what are called stock agencies. And so you would actually get your work into an agency, and they would actually sell that work to magazines and publishers who wanted to use it. There's not a lot of folks today that have the ability to be well enough known that magazines are going to be calling them on the phone asking for an image.
All righty, great.
We're just right now almost out of time, but a lot of great photographers have exhibits at great art galleries, and so it's another wonderful form of art. On that note, Phil Corliss, thank you for being here. You've been so informative, and I know we have viewers that will benefit from this wonderful advice that you've given. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll be with us again next week at the same time. We'll discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.